It's great to see. It's great to see everyone. Hold on, let me just adjust my system there a little bit. For our Congress in Your Kitchen for what is this, June? I lose track of time in this very strange year that we've been having. Let me just start with a few reflections. Obviously, this has been a very difficult few months for all of us and for the country as a whole, particularly the crisis of the coronavirus pandemic, which has cost our country more than 100,000 lives. It's forced us to create a massive amount of economic dislocation. And I don't think any of us at this stage can say that we have escaped the horror and the hardship that this has imposed on our community and our country. And then, of course, the last couple of weeks has been a period of some turmoil in America. But I'm feeling perhaps strangely a bit more hopeful and optimistic today than I have been in some time, not because I want to minimize the extent of any of these problems, not because I'm free of anxiety about our country's future, but because I think we are, as Americans, responding pretty well to the challenges before us. And I think our institutions are responding pretty well. We have come together as a people to combat this pandemic. And in New Jersey, I think we have done a tremendously good job, partly because of good leadership from the top, but mostly because all of us have decided, despite all of these sacrifices, to do sensible things to protect our neighbors, to protect our loved ones, to protect our communities. Today, I think we only had a little over 200 new cases in the state of New Jersey. I'm sure you have seen how the data has demonstrated the extraordinary progress that our state has made, which I think justifies careful, gradual reopening of the economy. In response to the horrible video of the murder by a police officer with 3 other officers standing by of George Floyd in Minnesota, I think the country has also come together in a pretty extraordinary way. These demonstrations are continuing. You don't see them as much in the media, I think precisely because they're very peaceful. But overwhelmingly, the American people have been showing their horror and shock over not just this one crime, but the pattern that it represents, and their desire to see their leaders, their lawmakers, do something fundamental to rebuild trust between the police and the communities that they're sworn to protect, which I think would be a fantastic thing, not only for civilians, not only for those communities in our country that have lost confidence or perhaps never had confidence in law enforcement, but also I think very good for every single police officer who is striving to do his or her duty in the right way, in accordance with the law. And when we had what I thought was a potentially very dangerous response to some of these peaceful protests from the president, this attempt to literally call out the United States military, including active duty troops, to put down demonstrations in Washington, D.C. and across the country. The military as an institution responded, I think, in an extraordinarily important and positive way. Our chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Milley, made a very big mistake in being present for the violent dispersal of the peaceful protest in front of the White House, but he has apologized for that, and apologies are important because when you apologize, you acknowledge that there is a rule, you acknowledge there is a norm, a standard, and that it should not be violated. Um, I think, uh, I think, we, looking back on the events of the last couple of weeks, I think we can say that our institutions are still quite healthy, our democratic institutions in this country, in the way in which they resist efforts to subvert them. And then finally today, this is just today's news, but I was very heartened by the Supreme Court decision that establishes once and for all that nobody in the United States can be discriminated against, can be fired from a job because of who they are, because of their LGBT status. And if you look at the opinions in that case, the fact that members of the court from both the conservative and liberal wings joined together to say this, I think it's a very hopeful message. We passed a bill in the House, the Equality Act, last year, which does essentially the same thing. And for some reason, it's stuck in the United States Senate. We can talk about that later. But the Supreme Court just took care of a big part of the problem that we were trying to address in the Equality Act. And again, it shows us our institutions are still working. If one fails, others step in to correct the problem. Now, there's a hell of a lot that we've got to do, and here's what I'm focused on right now to try to get us out of the various messes that I've alluded to so far. Number one, we've got to do more to provide relief for people who are suffering economically because of the coronavirus. The CARES Act worked. This is another good example of institutions coming together. We did provide very effective relief for people who were suffering because of lost jobs, because their businesses were shut down. My team in my office has been working around the clock for the last 2 months to try to make sure that the aid we promised, that we approved, is getting to people in our district, and we've made progress there, but we've got to do more. And in particular, my number one priority is trying to make sure we get relief for our state and local governments, because without that, we will not have well-functioning fire departments, police departments, EMTs, public works, parks, everything that we rely on our state, county, and local governments to do. We've done that in the House through the HEROES Act. It is waiting for Mr. McConnell's go ahead in the Senate, and he has said, fortunately, there will be another bill. So I think the only question is when he's willing to sit down and what the final contours of that bill will be. Second, we're talking a lot about rebuilding. We're talking a lot about reopening America. We need to be talking about rebuilding America. And this week, in one of my committees, the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee, we are going to be passing on to the full House an infrastructure bill that invests in America, that fixes our bridges, our roads, our tunnels, including the Gateway Tunnel project, which has been my top priority for transportation in the state of New Jersey. We're going to get that done in the House probably in the next 3 or 4 weeks. The Senate, I think, has acknowledged we need an infrastructure bill. President Trump has acknowledged we need an infrastructure bill. So I don't know if we'll be able to pass it this year, but this is absolutely in the realm of the possible, and it's going to be a huge, huge priority for me. And then finally, I started by saying we only have 200 plus new cases of coronavirus, but that's still 200 plus new cases. This thing is still being transmitted, even here in New Jersey, where we've done such a good job in beating it back. And I'm sure you all have seen the news about what's happening in states that have not taken this as seriously, that rushed to reopen too quickly. They're not experiencing a second wave. They're still experiencing the first wave getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And we can't build a wall around New Jersey, obviously, and keep every other American out of our state. And so we have got to be cognizant of what's happening from Arkansas to Arizona to Florida to Georgia, places where this thing is still continuing to spread. The HEROES Act provides resources, but it is no substitute for political will to do the right thing. So with that, I put a lot of issues on our kitchen table. I'm sure you guys have a lot of questions about some of the things that I raised, but also other things I haven't had time to raise. So have at me with whatever's on your mind, and I look forward to an interesting and productive discussion. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Tom. And I know I did cut out there for a little bit. So if you do have a question at any point, please just use the chat feature at the bottom of your screen, include your name and the town you're from. I know a few people have submitted some casework type of questions already. Just please make sure you include contact information with those so our staff can reach out to you and hopefully help you out with the issues you're facing. Tom, your first question is, New Jersey is preparing to go into the second wave of opening up. What is Congress doing to ensure that local governments are prepared for the next wave of opening up and also possibly a second wave and a spike of coronavirus cases?
Yeah, thanks. So I already mentioned the most important thing, I think, and that is the state and local government relief that we provide in the HEROES Act. And we know why this is so needed, because revenue is drying up at the state and local level, obviously, because businesses have been shut down, the economy has been shut down. And whether you're the state of New Jersey or Somerset County or the township of Bridgewater or Montgomery, you have to balance your budget. That's a legal requirement. It can't be evaded. And so if the revenue projections turn out as we expect, without relief, the only choice that our municipal governments, our county, or state will have will be either to hugely cut back on public services, which for our municipalities is probably going to begin with police, fire, and public works, or raise property taxes, which of course we don't want either. So that's why we're trying to provide the third alternative, which is relief from the federal government. Every single municipality in our congressional district would receive significant relief if the HEROES Act, as we passed it in the House, were to be adopted by the Senate. So that's number one. Number two, and we also try to take care of this in the HEROES Act, we need to get really comprehensive coronavirus testing and contact tracing programs up in every single state. We've made some progress in New Jersey since the last time I think many of us spoke. We're not where we need to be on testing, but it is easier today for folks to get a test, not just at those drive-through facilities, but at pharmacies, at Walmarts. All of that is going to expand further in coming weeks. Where we have not yet gotten as far as I would like is in the contact tracing system. If you feel healthy right now and nobody's telling you you need to get tested, you're probably not going to get tested. So what we need is that system that tells you, well, you may feel fine, but yesterday you did spend more than 10 minutes with somebody who tested positive for coronavirus, so you should probably get tested. That's what we need to make sure that in the fall, when there is a strong possibility that we will see a spike in cases in New Jersey, that we can get ahead of it in the way that we should have gotten ahead of it in February when we knew it was coming in the first place. We're going to get a second chance, unfortunately, to get it right. And I want to make sure that when that time comes, we do not have to do what we had to do the first time, and that is shut down the entire economy.
Thank you, Tom. Our next question, what are we doing at the federal level to ensure every citizen has an opportunity to vote? Will mail-in and absentee voting be expanded in New Jersey?
Thanks. I think I heard the key words. Mail voting, everyone, New Jersey. And that's a good, I think we just keep repeating those words, and add the names of the other 49 states and the District of Columbia to that list. Uh, Look, I want to make sure that everybody in this country can vote safely this November. That's pretty fundamental. It's straightforward. And if we are experiencing a spike in coronavirus in November, whether it's in New Jersey or any other state, we're going to see a lot of people wanting to vote from home, wanting to vote by mail, because it's the only safe way to do it. And on top of that, and this is just as important, it's going to be impossible to have in-person polling stations, polling locations in every single precinct in any part of the country that is being hard hit by this pandemic, because the poll workers are not going to show up. I think we've all noticed that when you go to vote, they're poll workers, and they tend not to be 19-year-olds, healthy kids. They're folks who are vulnerable to a disease like this. And so that's why in states like Georgia and states like Wisconsin, you had these enormous lines at the polls because they couldn't put up all of the polling stations. And for goodness sakes, this is America. This is not a third world country. You shouldn't have to wait in line for 5 hours to exercise the most basic constitutional right that we have. The only way to avoid that is to make sure that it is really easy for everybody to vote by mail. So what we've done in New Jersey for this primary in July is, for the first time, the state has sent us ballots to vote from home. We don't have to request them. We just get them in the mail. I already got mine. I know, these are being sent out at different times in different counties, but I already cast my vote. Took me 2 minutes, not 5 hours, not an hour, 2 minutes. Walked out to my mailbox, put it in the mailbox, and that's it. It's secure. Everything is carefully coded to make sure that you can't in any way manipulate the result of that kind of vote. That's what we need. In the HEROES Act, we require every single state to allow its citizens that opportunity, not a mandate that they have to do it that way, but that every citizen should at least have the option of voting that way. And we provide a lot of resources for states to prepare for a significant increase in the number of people who want to vote by mail. So we've sent that to the Senate. I'm sure you all have seen that Leader McConnell in the Senate and President Trump are not thrilled by the idea of large numbers of people voting by mail. President Trump, at least, has been very honest in expressing his reasons why. He said, if, quote, too many people vote, that will not be good for his party. I actually don't think he's right about that, but whether he's right or wrong, it doesn't matter which party it's good for. It's good for us as Americans to be able to exercise our most basic constitutional rights safely.
Thank you, Tom. And as we move into our live question piece or portion, beforehand, I will let you know when you're next up to ask a live question. Once we do call on you, please just unmute yourself. If you're having any difficulties or troubles unmuting yourself, after a few seconds, I'll probably jump in and try to unmute you myself. But as soon as we call on you, just go ahead and unmute yourself, and we should be able to hear you. You can ask your question live. So our first live question comes from Ann Perry. Ann, can you hear us?
Yes, I can. Mr. Malinowski, thank you so much. I'm with Citizens Climate Lobby, and I'll be meeting with Natalie on Wednesday. I appreciate what you've done with co-sponsorship of HR 763, but I'd like to hear you, the Energy Innovation and Carbon Dividend Act. I'd like to hear you talk a little bit about where you see climate change legislation at this point, whether we're just preparing for next year, or what if anything, might still be done this year.
Thanks. So the bill that you mentioned, just for everybody else, is a bill that puts a I think, an appropriate market price on carbon. It's sometimes referred to as the carbon tax. Some people are scared of that phrase because it includes the word tax. But what it would really do is basically put a price on the carbon that we burn that reflects the actual cost to the world, to our economy of burning all that carbon. We pay this fee, which goes to the government, and then the government turns it around and writes a check to every single American. So the government isn't raising money through this fee, it returns it to us, and it creates an obvious incentive for all of us as consumers and for companies in our economy to transition to clean energy, because then they're still getting the dividend, they're still getting the check back, but they don't have to pay the fee. So it's a market-based way of getting America ahead of the curve on climate. Virtually every major corporation that I've spoken to in the state of New Jersey supports this system, because instead of regulating them to death, it just creates a market incentive. So I'd like to get that done. I think the most we can expect is that the House will pass some climate legislation this year. I hope so. I've been pushing very hard for it. But I'm realistic. I would be surprised to see the Senate take up a major piece of legislation like that, or President Trump to sign it. So what can we get done this year that would be good for making America a stronger leader on climate policy? And again, for me, this is a competition. I want America, not China or any other country, to win the race to a clean energy future, because that is the future of our economy. It's not just good for the planet. So what can we do this year? Actually, that transportation infrastructure bill that I mentioned is something that will help, because it includes record new investments in mass transit. Yes, we're fixing highways for people who are driving, but there's a significant emphasis on mass transit, which will be good for the environment. There are a lot of programs that we're creating to promote the use of green infrastructure, to promote resiliency against climate change. We will also be doing a separate infrastructure bill that vastly upgrades our electrical grid in this country, so that we can support more electric cars on the highway and more electrification of stuff that right now is still powered by oil and gas. So in the infrastructure realm, there's a lot we can do to get our country to a point where we are using less fossil fuels, more clean energy. Again, that's great for the climate, it's great for the air we breathe, but it's also ultimately the thing that will enable America to be the economic leader in the world. Thanks.
Thank you, Tom, and thank you, Anne. Our next question comes from Sandra and Wilbert from Montgomery. Sandra and Wilbert, can you hear us?
Yes. Can you hear me?
I can, yes. Hi, Sandra.
Hi, Tom. I can't see you, so forgive me if I'm not looking directly at you.
That's okay.
So my question concerns racial equality. To be honest, I was quite disappointed with your response on the George Floyd situation. I received letters from other politicians. I know Cory Booker has been out there, received a beautiful letter from Bob Menendez, received a beautiful letter from Andrew Zwicker, who's my local assembly person. I looked on your website, and prior to the House bill, there was nothing. I received emails from you about, I think, the winner of an art competition, which quite frankly I felt to be offensive. And I also, we have a racial justice group that we're running here in Montgomery. And so we've been looking at your posts, and we've seen your Twitter posts, and I think there was a Facebook one also. And we noticed that you felt short of saying that Black Lives Matter, and that was curious to us. And also making a statement that you will work to dismantle racism. So I guess that's my overall comment. And I'm wondering, why haven't you really embraced the moment as a lot of other people are doing, whether it's in the private sector or public sector?
Well, thank you for raising that, and I'm glad you did if you have that concern, but I have to admit I am a little bit puzzled. Last weekend, I spoke at, I think, 5 demonstrations across the district. I spoke to thousands of people in Flemington, in Summit, in Milburn, in North Plainfield, fully embracing the moment and the movement. I've repeatedly said Black Lives Matter. I was just calling up my, if you look at my Twitter feed, my background picture says Black Lives Matter. I was one of the sponsors of the
I'm sorry.
Justice and Policing Act.
Yes.
And so I've been out there marching. I have been speaking. I have been posting my comments on Twitter, which is, as you know, that is me speaking in my voice. And I think a number of the rally speeches are on our social media on Facebook and Instagram, which my team runs. So, please be assured, there's no hesitation in my mind. There are a lot of ways that we communicate to our constituents. Some people send out emails. A lot of those are fundraising emails, actually, and I've been a little wary about using this as an issue for fundraising. But I've been absolutely out there in the community and with the community, expressing, again, not just words, not just solidarity, not just sentiment, but in all of my speeches, I have emphasized, here is what I intend to do. Here is, because I'm a legislator, right? I'm not out there just to say beautiful things. My job is to pass laws. And so what I'm determined to do is to make sure that we get this Justice and Policing Act through the House of Representatives as soon as possible, and we will do that. And that in the negotiations with the Senate, we take a tough line, because we don't want something at the end of the day that's just some blue ribbon commission studying the issue. This is a moment when we have an opportunity for perhaps the first time in years to actually get real changes to policing in this country, to how police interact with the people who they're supposed to be protecting and serving. And so I'd love to hear from you about the bill, because I think it's got a lot of good things in it. There may be things that are not in it that should be. But that's got to be our next step here. It's actually passing legislation that will change things once and for all, so that we end this cycle of people having to come out and scream every time there's a bad cop caught doing something horrible to a person on video. We know perfectly well a lot of those scenes are not captured on video. So
exactly. Tom, so I'm not so much concerned about this bill, because my feeling is that these things happen because Blacks have been designated as a low status group. So I'm more concerned about the energy going to dismantle white supremacy. That I see as the core of the problem, and you'll hear a lot of people echoing that sentiment, and so that's what I want to hear from you. Quite frankly, I'm not sure how much effect a federal bill will have, but that being aside, for instance, I got a beautiful letter from Andrew Zwicker outlining, not in detail, but making a commitment to dismantle racism. And talking about his feelings about this, and I would have liked to see that from you. I don't know when you posted that Twitter feed on Black Lives Matter, but when we looked, and this was about a week ago, we didn't see anything saying Black Lives Matter. But I take your word for it. But again, the bill is nice, but we're more concerned about really tackling racism, since that's at the core of this. Do you have a platform? Would you maybe if I send something, you can talk to our group about what you think about that?
Please, if you want me to show up somewhere, please let me know. I can't do it if I'm not invited, right?
Okay, we're in Montgomery.
And as far as, again, I've got to tell you, like, I haven't just been talking about this in the last couple of weeks. When you talk about white supremacy, there are different layers and levels of it, as I don't need to tell you, obviously. But last year, if you ask me what is my proudest accomplishment as a member of the House of Representatives, is that I got restored every single penny that the Trump administration cut from the Department of Homeland Security's program to fight white supremacist extremist groups in the United States. Now, I know that's only one level. That's the most extreme. Those are the guys who are out there, radicalizing young men to walk into an African-American church or a synagogue with a gun. Those are the guys who are recruiting people to do violence in this country. And you're talking about a much broader problem of institutional racism.
Right.
But that is an aspect that I have taken on. And again, I will send more lovely letters if that's what's needed, but I'm proud of the actual work I've done to make a difference. When Donald Trump tweeted last year, insulting women of color serving in the United States Congress, I hope you know that your congressman wrote and led the passage of the first resolution in over 100 years passed in the Congress condemning a sitting president of the United States for using racist language, for telling people, go home to your country because of the color of their skin. And
I didn't know that. That's fantastic.
So, I'm a fighter, and I feel really passionately about these things. As much as I focus in my day job, yes, on recognizing kids in our district who deserve recognition for the work they do, getting money for our transportation projects so that all of us can be going to work in New York or anywhere without getting stuck in traffic or stuck on a train. These practical things, that's a big part of my job. But I deeply, profoundly care about the moral challenges that we face as a country. And I think I've been known in my first 2 years as someone who sticks his neck out a lot when I feel strongly.
Thank you,
Thank
Tom.
you.
Thank you for raising it. I'm glad I had a chance to address that.
Thank you.
Thank you both. And Sandra and Wilbur, please look in your messages. You'll see a message from me with my email address. Please connect with me and we can definitely see about setting up a meeting in the future. Our next question comes from Sal. Sal, can you hear us?
Yeah, so thanks for the opportunity to ask this. This is a sort of a niche issue. There are H-1 visa holders. They're required to leave the country if they lose their job. So people are losing their jobs, due to the COVID-19 situation. The same thing is causing the airlines to cancel the flights. There are many, most of the countries we do not have flights out. So if they stay more than 10 days, it's a black mark, and actually they can be blacklisted from entering the country forever, right? So now this situation is causing both them lose their jobs as well as they cannot leave, and putting them in a situation of getting blacklisted forever. Would Congress provide any relief on that? My second question is more straightforward about voting. Would Congress invest in some electronic public key infrastructure that would help with electronic voting, remote electronic voting, and also it can be used for other purposes. What's your thought on that?
Thank you so much. You know, I didn't fully hear the question on electronic voting. What, can you repeat that?
Yeah, it's called public key infrastructure, where we can identify, we establish identity by electronically instead of through mail. So it'll be a cheaper form of remote electronic voting,
Oh,
and
I
also
see,
it
yes.
can help people participate in a much larger scale.
Yeah. Well, I'll take that first and just say I'm very interested in using technology to verify people's identities in a number of areas. This is something that's very, very new and very, very interesting. It's been, you know, it has been talked about as one way to build a remote voting system for the future, but it's not ready for prime time in the year 2020. And I think right now there's so much worry, and I think very legitimate worry about whether we can run a legitimate, credible national election in November in just a few months, given all of the turmoil, all of the divisions in our country, the accusations, I think false accusations that have been made against mail voting, the coronavirus. You know, I think we really do have to focus on trying to make sure November works as well as possible. But I am interested in studying that kind of system and whether over time we can build people's confidence in it. On the H-1B visa issue, look, I have been all over this for the last year. We have many people in our district, many businesses that rely on H-1B visa holders. And of course, these are human beings, often with relatives in the United States, with loved ones here. And white supremacy in our country. Well, the president's chief immigration advisor.
We lost you in between for.
Hey, sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we lost you for about a minute.
Sorry. So I was talking about the H-1B visa issue, which you raised. I mean, you know, one of our challenges the last few years is that we have had a relentless, aggressive effort from the White House, led by the president's advisor, Stephen Miller, who has been denounced by major civil rights and Jewish American organizations as a white supremacist in the White House, running our immigration policy. An aggressive effort to try to make it harder for people to come to America and to stay here, not only illegally, but legally. This is a legal immigration program, a legal work program. And as you rightly said, there's an effort from the White House basically to force people out who came here on this legal work program. And you added a very, very important additional wrinkle, which is that, you know, even if you're told you have to leave, you can't leave because the international flights are not operating anywhere near the frequency that they did before. I have co-sponsored legislation, signed letters, done everything I can to try to encourage an expansion of the H-1B visa program. And certainly we've been advocating to protect people who are here on it. I will commit to you, because I don't think we have paid sufficient attention to the catch-22 of somebody being told you have to leave, but then you can't leave. And so if you don't, it's a black mark and you can never come back again. Something has to give there. And I will work with my staff to follow up on that. Thank you for raising it.
Thank you.
Our next question comes from Eric. Eric, can you hear us?
Yes.
Hi,
Yes,
Eric.
Congressman Malinowski, how are you?
I'm good. Good to see you.
Good to see you too. So first of all, thank you for taking the time to be here on these Zoom meetings. I found them very helpful, and enlightening, and just as a constituent to learn what's going on locally and nationally. In fact, your social media feed has been very helpful too, because last time after you spoke, I went on there and saw that the CVS in Montgomery, the new location, was doing testing. And so I went ahead and did that and thought that was good and tested fine. But then I went to the rally for Black Lives Matter in Princeton and also in Montgomery. And so I was curious to know personally, and for everyone involved, how often can someone get tested? My second question is related to that. When will a contact tracing program be available in our district? And how can I get involved and others get involved?
Well, it's interesting. How often can you get tested? Well, I know what I want the answer to that question to be. I want you to be tested as often as you feel you need to be. And, we're still at a point where we do not have immunity tests that are reliable enough for people to just get that one test to show whether they're immune or not, and then they're free and safe and they can go do anything. Okay. So we are still reliant on tests that show whether you are currently infected with the coronavirus. And, if you're relying on that test to tell you whether you can safely go back to work or back to school, then you probably need to be tested fairly often. When you went to the CVS, what did they require to?
It was very simple. It was the drive-through. Mm-hmm. They gave you the package, the kit in the car. It was a couple of swabs on each nostril.
Did you need a prescription?
No.
Okay.
So I applied online through the CVS website. It was very simple. Good. And I was actually able, I live around the corner, so I was literally there in 10 minutes and they were available.
Good. And how long did your results take to get back?
2 days.
2 days. Okay. So that's pretty good. We need more of that. Yep. And, I'm sure you feel like it's more peace of mind to know that you can do that, and to know that others can do that, because of course we want other people to be safe for their sake and for ours. Now, what's needed next, as I mentioned before, is the contact tracing. Mm-hmm. And the governor has said that that system is up and running. We do have contact tracers in the state of New Jersey. Presumably, if you had tested positive, this is the way the system is supposed to work. If you tested positive, a contact tracer would have spoken to you and interviewed you about contacts you may have had, and then those people would have been notified. Not that they were in contact with you specifically, because your privacy would be protected, simply that they had been in contact with a COVID positive person and that they should get tested. So we need that prompt. We need that system where the contact tracers are out there prompting folks who are feeling fine, who may not think they need to be tested, to go and get tested. So they're out there, but it's not nearly extensive enough yet. And we still don't have, we don't have the app-based contact tracing system that I think we really need to have. People worry Americans are not going to download this app. We're not going to cooperate. I think that should be tested. We cooperated overwhelmingly, right, with the stay-at-home orders. Mm-hmm. Not just because it's not someone had a gun to our heads. We did it because we knew it was the right thing to do. And so I do think we need the state, we need our public health agencies to be encouraging us to download these apps, so that you're just automatically notified if 3 days ago you were in close proximity. It could be to a total stranger, mm-hmm. who ended up testing positive. That's where we need to be by the fall.
It doesn't seem like it's at the level that it should be, though.
It's not yet, no. And again, I try to focus on, what is my responsibility here? First and foremost, Congress provides the resources. And we provided some. The HEROES Act provides significantly more. And I don't expect that to be controversial when we do sit down with Senator McConnell to hammer out the next package. So hopefully there'll be a lot more resources for the state of New Jersey to hire these contact tracers to promote, hopefully, the apps and other ways of getting the word out. The second thing is, I speak to the governor frequently and to his team. I think he's done an excellent job, but I've sometimes been tough with him and pushed him to do more, do faster, and I will certainly, I'll be as annoying as I need to be with anybody to make sure that we get this right.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you, Eric. Our next question comes from Barbara. Barbara, can you hear us?
Yes, I can. Hi.
Hi, Barbara.
Congressman. I have a question. I'm a special ed teacher. I'm a special ed art teacher at a receiving district in Warren. I am basically petrified to go back because I teach, most of my kids are from preschool age all the way up to age 21. They're very low functioning. They're kids that will not wear a mask. We do takedowns. We do all that stuff all the time. They can't adhere to social distancing. They will never wear a mask. I know that. And we're virtual for our extended year program. I have pre-existing conditions. I'm 63 and I'm like, to be honest with you, I'm petrified to go back.
Yep.
I just don't know what to do. I'm contemplating right now retiring, which I really shouldn't have to do because of COVID. But I'm really concerned about like how they're going to bring people, the schools back. Our school, we can't do staggered hours. Our kids need consistency. The busing alone would cost a ton of money. Plus, getting the school ready, with our kids, they have to go to the bathroom right away. It's just a mess. And I'm on the reentry committee for my school, and we're sitting there going, how are we going to do this without putting our lives in danger? Because our school's going to probably look more like a hospital than it will a school.
Well, thank you so much for raising that and describing it so vividly. It won't surprise you that I don't have a magical solution for you that no one else has thought of, right? What we have tried to do is to extend some of the programs in the CARES Act for people who really should not be going back to work. So that's number one. And I've been thinking about this problem in particular. Let's say a business is reopening or a school is reopening, but there are particularly vulnerable employees, right? It's okay for most employees to go back to work, but what about those who are immunocompromised? What about those who are most vulnerable? Are we going to put them in a position where, as you say, they have to lose their job or retire because they sensibly think that they can't go back yet? We have to think about what the solution to that problem is. And number two, and I know money doesn't solve everything, but it is essential, right? If we are going to be taking extraordinary steps to prepare a school to be able to take kids back, and particularly, as you say, kids with special needs who pose special problems, that is going to cost money. And how do you pay for all that if simultaneously the school district is facing a budget crunch because revenue are not coming in, right? And the only possible answer to that problem is relief from the federal government, because for better or worse, the federal government can borrow money in ways that Somerset County cannot, right? So that's why I keep coming back to this as the most important thing that I can do to make sure that our county, our municipal governments, by extension, the school district, have the resources that they need to work around the problems that you just laid out for us so vividly. And it'll still be not perfect, right? It can't be. We just got hit so hard by this thing that, no one expects September, October to be perfectly smooth. But we want to make sure you've got the tools that you need to make the best of that situation, rather than starving you of the resources you need at the moment when you need them most.
I've heard also that if the federal government does not bail out the state, that we're looking at 20% teacher layoffs. That is a huge number with what we're facing, because with the enormous costs that are going to be going on in the districts, not only with busing, but just getting the building ready. Yeah. And the additional staff you're going to need to keep that building sanitized, and it's just a mess. And if you lay off 20% of your teachers, how is this going to work?
Yeah, I don't know what the number is, because we don't know what the revenue actually is going to be, but there's no question, without relief, there are going to be layoffs. And it doesn't begin with schools, fortunately, because our municipal governments, by law, they have to make their school contribution first before they spend money on anything else. But guess what? That means they're going to be laying off cops and firefighters and public works staff and all kinds of other things we depend on. And on top of that, the state aid to our school districts will probably be significantly come back. And that's probably where you would get some teacher layoffs. Look, we just don't want that. This is not a partisan thing here. I'm a Democrat. I talk to Republican mayors and county officials about this all the time. We are totally united on this. We are the hardest hit state in the country. We need this help. We send more in taxes per person to Washington, compared to what we get back than any state in the country. We have an absolute right to ask for this help in this moment of emergency and crisis. I'm going to fight like hell to get it.
Thank you very much.
Thanks so much.
Thank you both. Our next question comes from Beth. Beth, can you hear us? There you go. Can you hear us now? There we go.
I'm unmuted, right? Okay,
yep,
so
there you go.
Thank you very much for doing this, but with all the attention that's going into possible vaccine development for COVID and getting schools reopened and everything that we're just so completely devastated and trying to wind our way through, I'm afraid that we're going to lose appropriate attention to having flu shots. And I'm worried that there's going to be a shortage of flu vaccine, because everyone who can medically get a flu shot should get a flu shot, from children all the way to seniors, in addition to pneumonia and other. So is the federal government on top of this? Because we have experienced shortages in the past, and most people want to get them in October. They don't want to get them in August. We're told that it's too soon.
Yeah.
Is there any thought being given to this?
Let me follow up on that question, because I don't know the answer. It's a very, very good question. You're right. We are, sometimes the urgent crowds out the important, and the urgent has been the coronavirus. Rightly so. We've lost more than 100,000 Americans. But that doesn't mean other things go away, and it is still the responsibility of your government to make sure that we are prepared. So let us follow up on that, because it's a very good question to which I don't know the answer.
Right. And also it dovetails with coronavirus, because once we get into flu season, we don't know what we have. Of course, we're going to be able to get tested, but
yeah. Well, there's a lot of what has been referred to as flu-like symptoms over the last few months has been actually coronavirus, because we didn't have the testing to be sure. And COVID-19 apparently presents in all kinds of ways. At first, there was just like 3 symptoms that you have to have COVID-19. Turns out that's not true. But let us take a look at that. Meanwhile, one thing I've been working on is legislation to make sure that our strategic national stockpile of medical equipment, including personal protective equipment, is fixed so that we are always ready for a potential global pandemic, whether it's a coronavirus or an Ebola or something that we've never seen before. We have not been ready. And this is not just a Trump administration problem. It was a problem in the Obama years as well. So I've got a bill to fix that, which was incorporated in the HEROES Act, so passed the House. Hopefully it stays in with whatever gets sent to the president. If not, we're going to try to pass it as part of the appropriations bills to fund the government for 2021.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you both. We have a few more last minute questions. We're going to try and knock them out and respect everyone's time. Linda from Basking Ridge, can you hear us? Linda, can you hear us?
I can hear you.
Perfect.
Hi. I'm a small business owner, and we have some concerns in regard to because we could open one of our business this week. It's a preschool, and we're opening back up, and it's been very tough to recall the staff. They're very angry at us because we call them back to work because of the 600 stimulus check. So they lose it once we call them, and I can understand from their viewpoint, right? So, but as owners, we're very concerned about the fact that it's being talked about being extended to December. It's going to make small business even difficult to hire employees as we ramp up. People don't want to return back to work. And then if this continues, a lot of business won't be able to sustain ourselves. And we're already opening in the red with huge reds. And we will not be able to sustain the business. And then we will be forced to close. And once more and more small businesses are closed, more and more jobs will be lost permanently. And then even if you continue to give people money, they will not be able to spend it anywhere, nor will they be able to find a job when they're off unemployment. So is there anything that the Congress is doing in order to focus on long-term fixes? Because giving out free money is not long-term fixes. It's going to make the U.S. economy into a worse situation later on. So we need to really figure out how to help the small business sustain so that we have the jobs in place in the future. But if we keep on giving out free money and then small businesses close and there'll be no jobs permanently, we're not going to recover as a country.
Yeah. So I completely agree. Everything we've done has had the goal of keeping our small businesses going. But the problems that you just mentioned are very real as well. Can I ask you before I answer, did you apply for a PPP loan?
Yes. But then our rent is very high, and and our landlord is not backing up. It doesn't even, and we're only allowed a certain percentage. It doesn't even cover. It probably covers 1.5 months or something of rent. We could only use 40% of it, and then. And we've been closed for 3 months, so that it doesn't even cover for it. And our rent is just it's not something that we could recover. And today we open, but we used to have over 100-something students. Today we open with only 18 students. It will take forever to recover. So
a couple of things. First of all, we did just pass a bill to strengthen that Paycheck Protection Program, to give you more flexibility. So you have more money to spend on rent. It may not be enough, but it is more. And you can use it over a longer period of time. So that's number one. Number two, I agree with you about extending the $600 a week unemployment bonus through next year. I don't think that's a good idea. We created that at a time when we did not want people to work, right? We wanted you to shut down your business, as difficult as that was. We wanted your employees to stay home, as difficult as that was. And so in that situation, we thought it was fair to give people very generous unemployment benefits because we didn't want them to be working. Now we are gradually reopening the economy, and we do want people to work if it's safe to do so. And I know that if we were to continue this $600 bonus, it would be a disincentive for some employees to go back to work, and that will hurt our small businesses. So I don't think right now that program basically expires in July. So those employees would not be receiving that additional $600 for much longer anyway. And I don't believe that the next coronavirus bill we pass and send to the president will include an extension of that program. I think it's going to end.
I really
so-
hope so, because if they extend it, like it's like we're already viewed as the bad guys. Like employees are cursing us out, saying we're just like we're trying to offer them jobs, but then we're being cursed out because we're being as the bad people because we're calling them back to work, and then we have to report them. It's the things that we have to do, but we're viewed as the bad people. And I don't know. I just feel like if we continue to do this, it's just gonna make the economy is gonna really it's
Yeah.
gonna ruin the
No,
whole event.
I want to be paying people to work. I want to be paying them to stay connected to their employer. And there are better ways to do it. There's another bill that we have introduced in the House that uses the IRS to pay the small business to keep employees on the payroll. If we're going to be spending this kind of money, I would rather pay you to pay your employees than to do it through unemployment insurance. I don't know if that's going to pass. I want to be realistic with you about what's likely and what is not. But that is the way I would prefer to do it. At the very least, I can tell you I do not believe the $600 bonus is going to be extended beyond July.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much for raising that.
Thank you both. Our last question comes from Robin. Robin, can you hear us?
Hi, I can hear you. Hi, Tom.
All right.
Thanks for doing this this town hall. Very much appreciated.
Thank you.
I wanted to ask this. I know this topic was addressed a bit earlier. The topic of systemic racism and police brutality. And I know you shared the things that you've done, the things that you plan on doing. I wanted to know specifically your views on what changes need to be made to address, police brutality and systemic racism, and what you plan on doing, what Congress plans on doing, other than the Justice and Policing Act that you had mentioned earlier.
Well, that's where we're starting, and there's an awful lot in there. If we could get it all passed, it really would be a systemic change in how policing works in our country. Obviously, it would take time for that change to really be felt, but it would be in law. It would be a very strong beginning. So what does it do? Well, you've heard some of this, I'm sure. Banning chokeholds and no-knock warrants, some of the practices that have led to unwarranted deaths at the hands of police, a national standard for the use of lethal force when it can be used by police officers. The answer only as a last resort when it's absolutely necessary to save a life. Banning racial profiling, very important. Reestablishing, enabling the Justice Department in Washington to play the role it should be playing in overseeing police departments across the country that have had serious systemic problems. We can use the Justice Department to go in and fix a police department if nothing else is working. And this bill enables that to happen once again. It deals with the militarization of our police forces. We don't see that as much in New Jersey, fortunately. And I have to say, most of the police chiefs I talk to get it. But across the country, you see these cops wearing military fatigues, carrying around automatic weapons, looking like they're the 82nd Airborne about to parachute into Iraq or Afghanistan. And if the goal is to restore trust, right, and confidence between police and particularly underserved communities that have lost confidence in the police, if you look like you're a commando, you're not going to be greeted as a friend. You're not going to be welcomed into the community. So those are some of the things that the bill does. Qualified immunity. This is a very controversial issue. But this doctrine that has enabled police officers in almost every case to avoid, to be protected against civil lawsuits. And we try to reform that in this bill. So that's what we got to do. With all of that, I know a lot of police officers. I admire anybody who says, I'm going to spend my life, I'm going to dedicate my life to a profession that doesn't pay a lot of money and where I'm going to be risking my life to protect others. And I want to support the good cops. Some of the stuff we want to do, some of the reforms, probably going to cost more money, right? If we want more community policing, if you want cops to be out there getting to know people in the community, going to schools, getting to know local business owners, we're not going to get that if we have fewer police officers, right? So that's why I've not been in favor of the defund the police slogan. I want to reinvent and reimagine the police. It is actually going to cost money to do the real reform that we need. But that's where we're heading. And as we do it, we're going to learn. We're going to figure out other things that need to get done. I want to get this started when we have this political moment that gives us an opportunity to get bipartisan support.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Mhm.
Thank you both, and thank you for everyone for hanging in with us the extra few minutes. I will throw it back over to the Congressman for closing remarks.
Thank you so much, DeAndre. Thank you, everybody, for joining. Those were great questions. The questions reflect the challenging times in which we live. But I think, as I said at the beginning, I really believe the American people are rising to the challenge. We need more leaders who will rise to the challenge as well. Leaders who, when they see a problem, like the problems that we have been discussing on this call, will say, I may not have created that problem, but it is my responsibility as an elected official to try to do something about it, not to blame others, not to explain it away, but to try to do something. And that's been my guiding philosophy. That's how I will continue to try to represent this wonderful district in which we're blessed to live. So thank you all so much for participating, for sharing your concerns, and I look forward to the next time we can do this, which I promise will not be long. Thank you very, very much.